Hello, everyone, and you might notice, right, this is a bit of an unusual intro from me. I normally have the intro nailed down because you are joined with myself and Lauren today, but this isn't just your standard preview show for the National League. Number one, because we don't have any National League fixtures this weekend. The FA Trophy is taking centre stage this weekend with the third round, and all 24 of our teams are in the division. But there was no podcast on Monday because I had to deal with some personal stuff. So we're back now, and we wanted to put a podcast out. But truth be told, we didn't want to be here for 2 hours just dissecting every FA Trophy game, did we, Lauren? So we thought, you know what else can we do to spice it up a bit? And we have decided we're going to do a National League Natter Q&A, probably our first one that we've done as a podcast, not only to get our sort of opinions and thoughts on your questions, but hopefully maybe as well you can get to know us a little bit more on a more relaxed basis, because this podcast is going to be a bit more relaxed. It's not going to have that much of a structure on it. Of course, we're going to touch on the trophy a little bit. We'll probably start on that, just talking about some of the main fixtures, but that's not the nooks and crannies of the podcast today. So, Lauren, how excited are you to be doing something a little bit different and answering and asking each of the questions?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, we're quite a chilled pod anyway, for the listeners that know us quite well. But I'm looking forward to it, you know. It's nice. I like chatting. I like exploring the questions that you guys have sent in to us. We appreciate that. And yeah, I'm just excited to have a nice little chat, really.
Amazing. So shall we get the I was going to say the boring stuff, but that's probably a bit harsh on the trophy. Should we get the formalities out of the way and just have a very, very brief look on the trophy this weekend?
Yes, let's do it.
So the reason why like we just said, there's a lot of ties and it would have took a lot of our time. And also, if I'm being honest, for the teams that have something to fight for, both bottom end and top end of this division at the minute, I think this competition is a bit of an unnecessary distraction, in my opinion. Obviously, you've got the National League Cup as well, which we've given our scathing opinions on in the past on this podcast. But also, I know the teams from lower divisions and stuff, it's a great chance for them to play some big boys and, you know, generate some income. But for the teams that have ambitions of survival and staying up, I just think there's bigger fish to fry. And to be honest, I just can't ever get excited for the FA Trophy. Of course, there's a day out at Wembley on the line at the end of it, but there's also bigger aspirations and bigger ambitions for the National League sides in this competition. Loz, before I go through a couple of the fixtures, what are your thoughts on the trophy?
I actually really like the trophy. I remember looking forward to it when we used to partake way back when. But I get what you mean about how it takes away from, you know, the league itself, and you've got all these other competitions going on. We've still got two of our boys in the actual FA Cup. That, which is, you know, another thing. But I think it's a nice, you know, it's gives the teams more of a chance, you know, to have a couple of games. Obviously, the much lower league ones, they don't get really a chance to go up into the big FA Cup games. So I really like it. I used to love going to see the games. I do get your opinion though. I do understand the your thinking of it, but I quite like it.
I think it's a little bit with me. It's a little bit the cup in terms of, I think the attendances in the trophy are reflected in people's desire for the trophy. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's never full crowds at trophy games, and that's because people only really care about getting out of this difficult hellhole of a division, really. So, but some of the ties that are talking, some of the ties that are sticking out to me just for like various reasons. You've actually got a Greater Manchester derby between Altrincham, who are slowly picking up form, and Robbie Savage's owned Macclesfield. That is one that's really interesting for me, just because of where we are geographically. I think that's a really interesting one. You also have, let's see what else we have here. You have Brentwood versus Southend, and that, you know, that could be a bit of a banana skin. Obviously, it's the 1 o'clock kickoff in the day as well. And Southend, we've talked about Southend underachieving a little bit so far this season, so maybe there could be a potential banana skin there. My boys are going to 1 second, I forgot. That's how much research I've done for this part of the podcast. 1 sec, let me
you
just
guys
bring
heading to Stockton.
Stockton, that's it. Yeah, and the one thing I do know about that game is it's played on like a 4G AstroTurf service, because it's actually in the college grounds. So that should be an interesting game, and there could be a banana skin on there, because obviously in the National League you're not used to playing on that many artificial surfaces, because you have to have elements of grass, you know, as league sort of ruling. So that'll be interesting. Rochdale are going to Leamington Spa. So there's a couple of David versus Goliath fixtures in this crop of rounds, definitely. And look, like you say, for the smaller teams, this is their FA Cup finals and their cup finals. And I don't want to sound disrespectful and try and take that away from them. It's just, unfortunately, my team are actually doing really, really well in the league, and I would hate for anything to derail that momentum. You know, like if we went and put like a 75% strength team out to try and win at the weekend, and James Norwood got injured, or Sam Clucas got injured, you know what I mean? I'd be so fuming, because it's just unnecessary in my eyes. But that is the very, very brief talking on the actual fixtures. There is a couple of FA Trophy questions that we can get into straight away, I guess. So speaking of that, the first question we had, what a very funny question from one of my fellow Oldham supporters. He said, "How much is the fine if you play a team full of supporters in the FA Trophy?" Now, I think that just kind of sums up not just Latics fans' opinions of this game, but I think it would sum up Barnet fans, probably York fans, probably Forest Green fans, and probably the teams in the bottom four at the minute. I just don't think it's priority. And I really wouldn't be that bothered if we turned out the kids on Saturday. But I know that probably won't happen, because we want to show respect. And obviously, of course. But yeah, I think that just shows the fans' appetite, really, and their mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny question. I do think that you'll see teams put out strong teams for respect, but it's a bit cheeky. I like it. I like it being cheeky.
Nice. And then some of the other FA Trophy based questions we've had. We have let's see what we have. Who do you think our Ovin will overachieve in the trophy, and who do you think will underachieve expectations in the trophy? And I really like this question because last year, so for instance, it is a big leveler, the FA Trophy, because the teams that are from like the 10th, 11th, 12th tiers, or just a little bit higher, always seem to raise the game, because it is the game of the season for them when they come to these big places and play these big teams. So I think you are at risk of seeing some of these bigger teams, quote unquote, being a bit complacent at the weekend. And like last year, Oldham got knocked out at Boundary Park to Headington at home in the third round. In this round, this time last year, so obviously we can't take our eye off the ball. But like I said, I think it's going to be a difficult game for Southend to navigate. I also think Macclesfield and Alty will be an interesting game, because obviously Macclesfield have the sort of star power and the famous ownership of Robbie Savage now, and I'm sure the money that comes with that, I don't like. So that could be an interesting game. But I think there'll be a couple of teams wary of banana skin performances here, right, Lauren?
Yeah, I think it's one of those. I mean, we talked about it when we talked about the FA Cup. It's one of those competitions where you expect to see some upsets, because like you say, it's the game of the season for some of the little ones, and them having the opportunity to go and play at a bigger ground is always more fun. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a National League winner of the trophy. I think that we're going to see a lower league winner.
That is very, very controversial, considering it's only the first round that the National League sides are in.
Yeah.
And I think of the last 2, 3, or 4 winners been National League teams. I think because I know am I right? I think the last 2 winners have been Halifax and Gateshead. Is that right?
Couldn't tell you.
And yeah, see, I'm the opposite. I'd be very, very surprised if a National League side didn't win it.
Do you think?
Yeah, because with all due respect, I think it would almost like, I remember when Headington beat us last year, and quite rightly so. It was all the paper and all the media were talking about for about 3 weeks afterwards. You know what I mean? All it takes is one of them stories, and people don't let it drop. So that shows how much expectation there is on the National League sides to be professional and confident all the way through these competitions and just get the jobs done, I think. But shall we move on to some league-based questions now?
Yes.
So the first couple are from our fellow co-hosts of this podcast, and I'll start with Adam. And he said, "Who are your early picks for relegation and why?" Now, luckily, I feel like we're quite prepared on this front because we've talked on this topic quite a lot on this podcast, and also there is 2 teams that we think are kind of washed away now anyway, and that means there's only really 2 spots available. In my head, I think Boston and Ebbsfleet are already gone, as we've spoke about on previous podcasts. But then if I'm looking at the table, just bear with me a second. If I'm looking at the table, I know you have the likes of Fylde, who are slap bang in trouble. Southend are not quite out of it, so it wouldn't surprise me it wouldn't be a surprise to see someone surprising getting a bit of a relegation scrap and maybe go down this season. I think, like I said, I actually think, even though they started terribly, I think Wealdstone are going to be a bit too strong now, and I think Wealdstone will survive. I also think Braintree will survive. So if I was to give my bottom 4, Lauren, now, and you can do yours in a second, I would say, in this order, I would say Ebbsfleet, Boston, Maidenhead, and then my shock is going to be Aldershot Town, I think.
Oh, interesting.
I just look at their form, and I think, apart from Ebbsfleet and Maidenhead below them, I think they're probably in the most inconsistent form of the teams that are just kind of out of the zones at the minute. And I've obviously they lost to Lodge and they lost Stokes in the summer, and we spoke about that previous on podcast this season. But I just think that them 2 losses have been massive for the Shots, and they've just not been able to get anywhere near the levels that we kind of came to expect of them last year. I know you have a big soft spot for Aldershot, but I think if I had to go out on my limb and pick a surprise, I would put Aldershot in that final spot. So yeah,
Okay.
that's my bottom 4.
Yeah. Okay. I would agree about Ebbsfleet. I think Ebbsfleet. I don't like saying teams are already down, because there's still plenty of football left to play. Right, we've still got 26, 25 games left, so we're not even halfway yet. But I do think Ebbsfleet are gone, unfortunately. It not that this is just my opinion. Boston, I think they're gonna try and turn it around, but I think that they will inevitably go down. I would agree that I could see Fylde coming out of that relegation. They always tend to. They always tend to manage to just not get relegated.
And I know you should never count anyone out, but we've said it multiple times, haven't we? I think as long as Fylde have Nick Horton in their ranks, I just don't see Fylde getting relegated.
Yeah, I do worry about that though. I do worry that it's not a one-man show, but I also worry that it could, like, if he gets injured and has a season-ending injury, I do worry for Fylde and their positioning, because he is such a big, part of the team. But if he stays fit, I can see Fylde getting out of the relegation zone. Maidenhead, yeah. So to be fair, I would agree with those three: Ebbsfleet, Boston, Maidenhead. If I had to pick someone else to go down, maybe Woking. Maybe, yeah, because Braintree have just appointed their new manager now after losing. Well, after getting rid of Harrop, they've just appointed Pitt, who was the assistant somewhat recently. So I think they might get a new manager bounce and manage to get out in the end. So yeah, I'll maybe say Ebbsfleet, Boston, Maidenhead, and then Woking as my fourth.
Nice. And look, it's we in a Q&A is just our opinions, and there's, like you said, there's a lot of football to be played, and there could be somebody that just starts to tumble, like somebody that we think's safe in mid-table that could just tumble, or there could be somebody that we think's away with it, like a Boston, that could just go on a heroic run now post Christmas and get themselves out of it. But that's the beauty of predictions, isn't it?
There's always the argument that Tamworth, who I personally love Tamworth, but obviously they've just got through to the next round of the FA Cup, and all those extra games, all those extra minutes, it'll mean that the players are playing more. They might get more fatigued. They open themselves up to injuries, so you could see something like that really affect their season, and you could have them start heading down the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to sort of the same sort of question, but at the top end of the table, I would say. Let's have a look. So Luke, who is a Gateshead fan, has asked us, who is your pick to go up by the playoffs, and who would your champions be as of today? If we had to call it today, who would we pick?
Okay, so go up by the playoff. Well, at first we have to. I would say, I might do champions first, and then I think I might have said this last week. My opinion always changes, and I think it would be really interesting to listen to our pre-season podcast that we did and our initial predictions for it. Because I remember for a fact that I said that I thought Forest Green would be sort of mid-table, and I thought that Sutton would be up there and battling. So I think it'd be interesting to listen back to that. But I think the way it is currently, I mean, York are just absolutely flying at the moment, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Forest Green go on to win it. Yeah, I mean, I probably change my mind every time that we ask this question on the podcast. But yeah, I'll go Forest Green going up as champions. And then I will say, I know Gateshead aren't in great form, but maybe I'm going to pin them as... Oh, wait, no. If Forest Green are going to go up, I think York are going to go via the playoffs.
Up by the playoffs. Yeah, I also agree. I think Forest Green will win. No, I think Forest Green will win the champion. Go up as champions. But see, this is very hard. This is very hard for me to answer this question because I currently support the team in fourth and probably currently support the team that's in the best form in the division in Oldham. So everything is pointing for me to say that I think we could win the playoffs because it is something I really believe, and I think I'd be going against myself if I didn't say that. But I don't want people just thinking, oh yeah, he's just picking Oldham because he supports them. But genuinely, I think the sort of statistics are there to say that Oldham can do it, and that's what I'm going to stick with. So if I had to pick today, I would go Forest Green to win it, Oldham up as playoffs.
Nice.
But like you say, like we just said with the bottom four and that race, we've said multiple times, and the thing is, I don't even think it's inconceivable for the title race just to be out of them top three right now. Obviously, it's looking a possibility, but like I said, there's Oldham in fourth who are albeit 7 points behind, but we have 2 games in hand. There's Rochdale that might fancy themselves to be able to mount a bit of a comeback to get higher. So I think there's, Gateshead could win the league. there's a lot of teams that sort of would be fancying themselves to go straight up. And then maybe, there's a couple of teams, Yeovil, Altrincham, that are on form now, just behind them playoff places. So there's probably one of 10 teams that are battling out for 2 promotion spaces.
Yeah, I genuinely think again, we've just discussed how we're not even halfway through the league. Like any of them can fall off, and I do think that you might see a push for the title from any of the teams. Yeah, down to 8th maybe could give it a go. Whether they will or not is a different matter, but I do think, there's over half of the league of the season left.
I mean, it's crazy when you look. Even somebody like Solihull Moors in 12th, who have had a bit of an inconsistent season and then started to pick it up recently in the last maybe 5-6 weeks. They're only 3 points off the 3 points off the playoffs in 12th, Lauren. So you know what I mean? It's going to be a crazy season for sure. But yeah, to kind of sort of marry that up and go with that sort of question, another question we've had is from, again, the other co-host on this podcast, Christopher, and he has asked, do we see any of the top 3 dropping off? And if so, who do we think is more likely to drop off out of the top 3? So I think you've got to play the argument that it's probably going to be York if it's any of the top 3. I think for as miraculous as York have been doing, I do think there has been chinks in their armor over the last couple of weeks. They've suffered a few losses, and they've been shown that you can get at them a little bit. But look, I think them 3 are very, very good teams, and there's no guarantee that any of them would drop off. But if I had to pick a third, just because they're probably a bit inexperienced being up and around here as well, because Barnet went all the way to the playoffs, obviously ended in disaster for them last year, but they've been there and done that. Forest Green are a huge side with plenty of EFL experience and EFL experience in their sort of ranks as well, playing staff. So yeah, I think if I had to pick right now, I think it'd be York to fall away, but that's no guarantee that the Minster men will do it. Will fall away. I'm asking the question and answering the question, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't think that any of the teams will drop off. I think that they're going to be battling towards the end. I also would agree. I know that I said that York would go up in the playoffs, but I can't see them dropping into the mid-table. If they're going to fall off, they're going to fall off into the playoffs. I honestly, I think that the top of the league is so strong. I mean, well, we've just said a lot of the teams are really quite strong at the moment. But yeah, I don't see any of them particularly falling off in the near future. But yeah, I would agree. Given Barnet ended up, did they finish second last season in the end?
Yeah,
they were. Yeah,
and then they got battered in the playoffs.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in and around second at the end of the season. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I see. I guess this is the sort of stuff you get when we try and do a Q&A before Christmas, because we could do this Q&A again in 2-3 months and our answers would completely change, But I think there are two valid reasons for sure. So next up we've got, what else have we got? Callum, our editor and social media man on this podcast. He said, which team, both good and bad, have surprised you the most so far this season? And good, I would say I have been thoroughly impressed with. Well, I guess it depends how we want to look at this question, because I could be like teams that I've been impressed with that have come to Oldham and I thought, wow, they're a good side. And in that case, it would actually probably be Solihull Moors. But I've not been impressed with their inconsistency. But if I'm looking at sort of a team that sort of surprised me in terms of how much they're overachieving or whatever else, I think you'd have to look no further than Yeovil, obviously. I know it makes me feel kind of proud though, because early in the season I was banging the drum about how I think Yeovil will do well, and they're a big club and people like, I don't see it, and now they're only a point out the playoffs. You know what I mean? That they can really go for it. So I would say Yeovil as my overachievers, just because I know they have the experience of being higher and whatever else. But and underachievers, I think probably I'd be surprised if we don't say similar. I think it's got to be Southend, right? I think they've gone through all that sort of hardship of getting their off the field issues sorted and getting the transfer embargo lifted, and for some reason, whether it's emotional blowout or whatever it might be, it's just not been happening for them. And look, we keep saying we think they're too strong to go down, but as things currently stand, they are I say they are 7 points off it now, but look, anything could change, and they're 7 points off it, but they're also more or less the same gap from the playoff places as well. And I think Southend would have at least expected a playoff push for sure. So yeah, I would have to say Southend have been my underachievers. What about you, Loz?
Yeah, I think now I can't remember because it's so long ago and I was quite frankly in a different continent when we did it. But I think I put Southend in the playoffs when we did our initial predictions. It's so long ago now. I actually can't remember anything I said. I do tend to waffle quite a lot anyway. But I thought Solihull would not Solihull. I thought Southend would be up there. I thought Solihull would be up there as well, but they're not that far off, to be fair, as we've discussed. You know who surprises me with where they are, which might sound a bit cruel, but I am surprised with where Sutton is. I think that they're doing really, really well this season. They're doing much better than I thought they would. Sutton are surprising me in a good way into their current position in the league. I not that I think that they would have done badly, but they're in and around there, and I thought that when they were coming down last season, I thought that it always takes a little while usually for an EFL team to. They usually have to spend a couple of years in the league to get themselves back on their feet. So where Sutton are, I'm impressed with.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds cruel and kind of quite an obvious one, but Ebbsfleet doing just how poorly as they are is, I mean, it's quite an easy, cheap shot, but like 9 points at this point in the season is I didn't expect them to be great, but I didn't expect them to be that far behind at this point in the season.
The thing is with Ebbsfleet, people might argue that obviously the 9-point haul is quite frankly, I don't want to say embarrassing because that sounds really bad, but quite frankly, it's really, really poor. Like, there's no way to dress it up. But also, they have been skating with death for the last couple of seasons. They survived barely last season. They really struggled up until like the last month and a half, 2 months ago, before the end of the season before. So I guess you could say the mental sort of fortitude that it took of that football club to pull themselves out of it for the last couple of years. Maybe the mindset has just given up on them a little bit and caved in, and this is sort of the burnout that we're seeing as like the cause of effect for the heroics over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. So maybe that's not necessarily their position itself is not necessarily surprising, but 9 points at this point in the season is, I think. I thought that they'd put more of a fight up than they have, because they ended in 19th last season. And yeah, I feel bad where they are.
Yeah, but before we get into the second round of questions, it's that time of the podcast. We're halfway through, and it's time for you to listen to our wonderful partners at Audible, who, thanks to our friend over at League One Lowdown, Jamie Johnson, has a wonderful offer to tell you about for how you wonderful listeners and viewers can get yourself an Audible description for dirt cheap money, thanks to Audible. So we will be back in a short while once you've listened to Jamie, and we will continue the questions when we come back.
This podcast is in association with Audible, and they bring you a fantastic offer. 99p for 3 months of their subscription. And for that, you also get a £10 voucher to spend on whatever book you want to listen to. It could be Richard Osman's Murder Mysteries. It could be Harry Potter. It could be the heaps of football autobiographies they have on Audible as well. And for 3 months, for 99p, you get 3 months of their service. Terms and conditions do apply, and you can find those below in the description.
Here's a completely random, not sort of football related question, but book related question for you, Lauren. If you had to have a book about your life, what would the title be?
Oh goodness. Do you have a title for your life's book?
I think so. It'd be something like disabled, something like it'd be something with my disability. So maybe like Life on 4 Wheels, or like something like that. The Aaron Diskin story, something to do with like a disability pun for sure.
Okay, I like it. My life is already full of some crazy stories, so it would have to be something like about unexpected or just getting myself in some interesting scenarios. But I've no idea, absolutely no idea. It would be something like The Wild Life of Lauren, but something more creative. But I'm not very creative.
Nice. So that's a nice little segue back from our partners Audible to back into the questions now. So we've got a few more left, and then I've got a couple that I'm going to bring to the party as well. So we have also had, I'm having a look, back to what we were saying early doors, because I missed this out. Trevor got in contact and said, how many of the clubs do you expect to take the trophy seriously this weekend? And we've spoke about this a little bit, but I think it depends what your ambitions are and where you are in the table, in terms of what sort of teams you'll see to put on. Say you sort of at the moment, say you're an Eastleigh who are maybe 9 points off the bottom 4, but also I was going to say quite a way off the playoffs, but they're only 3 points off the playoffs themselves. So maybe that wasn't a good analogy, but somebody mid-table that might not feel that they have a lot to play for at this point in the season might look and think, oh yeah, we'll give it a go, bring the money into the football club and try and go on a bit of a run. But I think if you're in that top 7, top 8 sort of talk, and you're in that bottom 6, bottom 4 talk, then I think the ambitions will be higher and the focus will be elsewhere. Lauren, what do you think?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I would say, like, I think people will try and have a decent stab at it, but I do think that there's, there are other, again, like we keep saying, there's so much left of the league, and I think people will always prioritize league and league position. I think you'll see the lower teams take it more. But yeah, I think yeah, I would say so. I would say that there'll be a couple of teams that take it seriously, but most, I think, will always prioritize.
Do you think there's an argument there for us to join on this sort of bandwagon with the Premier League teams that moan about the amount of fixtures for Premier League players to play? It's getting the same sort of treatment across the pyramid now. Like, if you look, if you're lucky enough to go on an FA Cup run, there's maybe an extra 4 or 5 games. If you're lucky enough to get to the final of the new inaugural National League trophy, that there's God knows how many games, 7 or 8. If you go all the way to the final of the trophy, that's another 4 or 5 games. Then you've got a playoff campaign. Then you've got a 40+ game league season. Do you not think at this point maybe the league have a duty of care for the players and the squads, and especially it's all right for an Oldham or a Gateshead or a Barnet that might have the bigger squads and the riches at the minute, but what about like a Boston or a Maidenhead that don't have the money and maybe don't have the same amount of income? If they get a couple of injuries, their season is completely derailed. At what point do you think that the league might have a bit of a responsibility to sort of be like, you know what, we need to work with the league to get a tighter schedule?
Yeah, I get that positioning, especially because I mentioned earlier with Tamworth going on into the FA Cup and they might get more players getting fatigued and injured. It is a real issue. Like it is something that we see. And I do get the argument. As a fan, I enjoy trophy game, cup games, and I like when we have different teams to play, because it's always nice watching your team play a new team that you've never seen before. But I do think that it just feels like there's more and more cups at the moment in the National League, and maybe there is an argument to say, like, when is too much too much. Like I say, I think it's is a valid concern, definitely.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think I think there is an argument there to say that the league might have to do something at some point.
To be fair though, you can't really have your cake and eat it, because I'm guessing if the replays would still exist in the FA Cup, then probably Oldham would have had an extra game now. Whatever else. So it's a difficult one to weigh up, but I do think there is a ridiculous amount of a ridiculous amount of games in the football calendar now across the divisions. And just to finish off then, before we do, because we are gonna, so obviously there is no predictions, because we would have ended up doing like predictions for like 30 odd games, and we're not really about that. But Lauren does want to take the opportunity to gloat the fact she has pulled the gap right back now, but I won't give it away. I won't give much away. Just the sort of final sort of question I will ask you right now is, who do you think, in your opinions, are the biggest club in the National League? And you can measure this by any metric you want, But I think there always is a bit of a competition and a bit of an argument between who is the biggest team in the National League, whether it be historically, whether it be sort of gates-wise, whether it be sort of trophy success. So I'm just interested to get your viewpoints on that, Loz, and then as an outsider, really, because you're a dirty Stockport fan. But
I am,
also I will give my opinions on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to look past Forest Green, I think. I think it's hard to look past them as much as they are like quite an easy answer. I think they are just massive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for this level, got great ground, brilliant ground. Although I'm still not sure about them being fully vegan. I like a chicken pie at the football. Unfortunately, but it's hard to look past them. Really, I'll be completely honest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm going to do this slightly differently because I'll be interested to see what metric you came up with Forest Green with in terms of. I don't think their attendances are the biggest in this division this year. I also don't think historically they have done that much. So in my opinion, I would say the two biggest teams in this, and I'm going to do two because I think there's arguments for both, and especially fan base wise, I think the two biggest teams in this division are Southend and Oldham. And the thing is, I would say this even if I wasn't an Oldham fan. You know, we're founding members of the Premier League. We got to an FA Cup final. We got to a League Cup final. We have nearly 8,000 fans weekly at home, which is kind of unheard of in this division. And like we just said, Southend are a sleeping giant. You know, they have such a passionate fan base. We've seen, you know, the troubles they've gone through we and stuff, and you know that they have really hardcore fans, and they've been ingrained in EFL and EFL history for a number of years. So I think I maybe look at it a different way, but I would say Southend and Oldham probably are up there.
I think that's fair, and there was a part of me that did want to say Oldham, to be fair, but I didn't want to give you the ego boost to be saying that I thought Oldham was a big club. I think for me as well, it's the fact that like in recent history, obviously I've played Forest Green quite a couple. Well, not me personally, I've not. But if I want to delude myself into thinking that Stockport's a big club, I remember literally last season playing Forest Green, so in my head they're a somewhat big club because I remember them being in that league very vividly.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, and that's the thing about Q&As, and it's all everyone's got different experiences and different football opinions and how they view things differently. So yeah, like that's kind of it for the Q&A section of the podcast. Again, we thank you for getting your questions in. I've really enjoyed doing this part, and look, if there's sort of demand for it towards the back end of the season, maybe in the post-season break we might do another one. And yeah, but before sorry, Lauren, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say the tweet and message will also stay up, so if after hearing this you still have other questions for us, I'm sure that we'll be in those comments. Just feel free to pop us some more questions.
Yes, absolutely. But just to finish off, go on, I'll let you have your moment in the sun. Obviously, we're not going to talk about every score and whatever because we don't want to bore you, but just get out what you need to get out your system about the current lay of the land with predictions.
Yes, well, thank you. Now, those of you who have listened to us for a while might remember just how confident Aaron was with his lead. Whilst I was out in America, I think the gap got to over 30 between the two of us. It was a big gap, and somebody was giving it the big one in the messages about how I may as well already get the tattoo.
I'd already sorted it out with a friend of mine that's a tattoo artist.
Well, I'll tell you, it's. I mean, there might still be a chance that I have to get a tattoo at the end of the season, but as it stands, I absolutely thrashed you last week. So we did our predictions with both the league games and the FA Cup games that included National League teams. And I won 12-5 in the end. So I won by a buffer of 7 points. Which means that the current score, the cumulative score at the moment is 146 to me, 147 to Aaron. So I am still losing, but I've closed the gap to just a singular point. One singular point.
I mean, that must mean, to be honest, I've lost the last 5 weeks on the bounce or something
You have.
like that.
You have. I'm pretty sure it is exactly 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think it's 5. Yeah.
That is almost that. To be honest, that is almost unforgivable. But the confident, arrogant version of myself is going to come out for a second and be like, you know how badly you must have done at the very start to be this excited, and I'm still in the lead. So I've had 6 stinking weeks, and somehow I've still managed to come out in the lead. So yeah, that's something I've got to hold on to, own up that look, I've had my bottom handed to me for the last couple of weeks, but I am still leading. I need to get my head back in the game, granted, but hopefully, like I said, we're taking a week off the predictions this week, but by the time we come back next Thursday, hopefully my head is back in the game and I can start extending that lead again.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I hope you don't extend the lead, quite frankly. I want it to stay as it is. Well, I don't want it to stay as it is. I want to keep winning. I want to keep my form.
You just said it first. You just said it there first.
No,
Lauren wants the podcast to stay how it is so she can get the tattoo anyway. So she's that desperate for a tattoo that she might end up getting one anyway. How cute is that?
Brutal.
So, with that being said, obviously a little bit of a shorter podcast because of the format change up. But if there's nothing else from you, Lauren,
nope.
We have been the National League Natter. Again, we thank you so much for submitting your questions in. There'll be definitely another chance to do this in the future. We will be back on, I was going to say Monday, but I don't know what the schedule is yet, whether we're going to be reviewing the trophy games or not. But we will put a tweet out one way or another. If not, you'll definitely see me and Lauren back on National League duty next Thursday to go back to league action. But in the meantime, we've been National League Natter at the deck, and we shall see you very soon.
Bye, everyone.